because they assumed that I had apparently betrayed them. To be able to pay off my college tuition, parents told me that they did not want to be living in their house anymore. And it was all thanks to my older sister, Janine. Janine is 4 years older than me and had always been the golden child of the family. There was no doubt about that. It has been very clear to me right from my childhood that whatever I did, Janine could always do it better. So I did not even bother to compete. She went to business school and everybody was really proud of her. But when I got accepted into a reputable college in the UK, history, it did not sit well with her. My parents had made it very clear that they would not be able to afford the tuition. So I had to figure something out for myself. I even asked them to help me take out a student loan and become a co-signer. But they told me that they did not want to take that risk. That was pretty disappointing, and we ended up fighting a lot over that. They had paid for my sister to go to college, but they claimed sending me to college was going to be very expensive. They had to think about their future since they were planning on starting a business around the same time. So they did not want to take a more risk than they could afford. I was at a loss about what to do because I felt they were trying to make things extra difficult just so for me. I would end up passing up on such an opportunity. They had already told me that they would not be able to help me out with the tuition. And I knew there was no way that they would be helping me out with the other expenses either, like traveling and my cost of living there. I knew that once I got there, I could work my way through college, but I would at least need some help with the tuition. With no other option left, I decided to approach my aunt. My aunt is my dad's older sister, and she's a much better person than either of my parents. We have always had a good relationship, but I know that my father did not like her much, and neither did my mom. So I tried to keep a distance from her, and we would only see each other at family get-together and stuff. Then I would have to speak to her whenever I knew that my father was not looking around. Because he really didn't like her. He thought that she was a bit of a show-off, and every time that he would meet her, she apparently made him feel small. However, in her defense, I really don't think that it was her fault. For context, she was 7 years older than my father, and he's a neurosurgeon. My father is not unsuccessful. But in comparison, everybody would say that she was the more successful of the two. Both my parents were dentists, and they were doing well for themselves. But my dad always had a habit of comparing himself to his sister. No matter how hard she tried to be his friend. He just kept being jealous of her, and he was so insecure that he couldn't even understand the thought of being a friend to her. She had told me these things after once I got kicked out of my own house. I could live with her until it was time for me to go away to college. We really bonded once I got kicked out. Since she became my only friend and confidant after that, I would really like to thank Janine for making sure that it happened. After I had asked my aunt to help me out, she had gladly agreed. And I had even begged her to keep this entire thing a secret. I did not want my dad to find out about any of this. He would absolutely lose his mind if he got to know that I asked for money from his sister. Janine, however, found out about it somehow. And one day, when I came back home after hanging out with my friends, I realized that all my stuff had been put into boxes, and everything was packed up and ready to go. My parents were sitting in the living room, ready to confront me with a bunch of papers, and Janine was standing by their side with the most smug look on her face. I still can't forget the sight, because even though it's been a whole decade since I'll never be able to forget and forgive the kind of humiliation that day my father had told me that Janine had handed them proof the family in order to be able to pay off my college tuition. And I have no idea what that meant. I knew that they had figured that I had asked my aunt to help me pay off my college tuition, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that I had betrayed the family. I tried to explain to them that I did not have any other option, which is why I had approached her. But then he threw the papers that he was holding in my face. And when I went through them, I realized that they were completely fabricated. Screenshots of emails that had apparently been exchanged between me and my aunt. Janine had somehow come up with heavily edited between me and my aunt. Apparently handed over the business and their details of my parents' company, along with a list of potential investors in exchange for her paying off my tuition. I don't know how Janine was even able to come up with something like that. I'll have to hand it to her. It was a pretty genius move. And I can't even imagine the number of hours it would have taken for her to sit and conceive of such a devious plan, and actually go through because the emails look really authentic, and anybody would have been convinced that they were real. However, when I went through those papers, I immediately told my parents that they were not real. Janine was trying to fool them. I even offered to open up my laptop and show them the truth. But they said that they believed my sister, and they had implicit trust in her, and they wanted me out of the house that very moment. I tried to beg them to let me stay, because even though I hated them from the bottom of my heart, at that moment I did not want to be a burden on my own. Since she was already paying for me to go to college, I did not want to end up living with her as well. But my parents did not budge, and said that they wanted me out because I had betrayed them, and they couldn't stand me anymore. So eventually I had to leave, and I ended up going to my aunt's place, where she treated me with the utmost kindness, something that I never received from my parents. Since then, she has been my only family. My parents never reached out to me after that, and the only person who texted me after that incident was only to tell me that she was really happy that I was gone when she texted me. so I wouldn't be able to use that against her. All she said was that I shouldn't have my laptop just lying around, and that she had known that something was fishy. The second I stopped fighting with my parents about the money for my college tuition, I had told a couple of my friends about it, and I do have a habit of leaving my laptop open, but that's usually just in my room, so I guess maybe she had been snooping around to find something against me when she realized that I had stopped fighting with our parents. So it must mean that I was able to get a hold of the money that I would need, and that's how she had come across the information. She had probably taken screenshots of other emails, edited and arranged with the help of Photoshop, in case anybody was still wondering how she managed to pull it off. It took me a long time to figure those things out for myself. I hope this satisfies the curiosity of anybody. It's not relevant, but I just thought I should mention it. After that, I had no contact with my family, and my aunt was the one who supported me throughout. She sent me to college, and after I graduated, she let me live with her until I found a job and was able to move out. I had expected that maybe I would be able to see my family on holidays, but they cut off the rest of our family as well. My aunt told me it was now that they had established a business of their own. They were too proud and believed they were above everyone, since it was doing relatively well. My parents were dentists, but my mother actually loved being in the kitchen, as did my father, so they had started a dessert shop for dental safe treats, and it was a pretty unique concept. So they were doing well, however. Once they started getting successful, they cut ties with the rest of the family, and that's why nobody had heard from them for the past 10 years. But then the pandemic happened a couple of years ago, and a lot of businesses like theirs took a serious hit. I'm assuming so did they, which is probably why my parents decided to get back in touch with me. A couple of days ago, I don't know where they got my number from, and it was totally out of the blue. I was at work when they called me, and my mother asked if I had a moment to speak to them. I had half of mine to just hang up without even a response. But I tried to deal with it calmly. I told her that I would talk to her once I got back, so I gave myself some time to think about whether I wanted her to speak to. It had been 10 years since I had last spoken to my parents, but I was also kind of curious about why they were calling me. Long once I got back home from work, I decided to call them back. When I did, they tried to make small talk with me initially, but I told them to cut it out because it was just making me more annoyed. I told them to stop beating around the bush. And finally, my mother told me that the real reason was to apologize and to make things right with me. She wanted me to come over and meet her because they had realized what a huge mistake 10 years ago, kicking me out of the house in favor of my sister. Since then, that decision has really backfired. She hinted at certain things during our phone call, and I tried to get her to talk about them, but she told me that she wanted me to visit her the next day and talk about things in detail. I tried very hard to get her to tell me over the phone, but she insisted that I should visit her and my father just once. I went over to the place the very next day in the evening after work. I was really surprised that the address they had given was not of the house I had grown up in, but of an apartment in a really bad neighborhood. I had no idea why they had to shift from our old house to such an apartment, but once I sat down with them and spoke, I realized that it was because I had assumed correctly. The business had suffered a lot during the pandemic. Unfortunately, it forced them to sell their house and a lot of their assets because they were not making any money. My parents seemed happy to see me, but mostly they just wanted to talk about how bad it had been for them. They told me that even during the pandemic, my sister with a business degree had the bright idea of selling to keep up with the bills, instead of shuttering the business for a while and starting afresh later on. She thought it would be a better idea to invest even more money to get things going. After the first phase, that had been a mistake because it didn't quite take off the way they had expected. Even after the pandemic had died down, the business is still struggling, but Janine has faith that it's going to work better. My parents really regret putting all their money into that. Since now they are the ones facing the losses. They told me that apparently Janine takes whatever little money they make from the business and keeps it mostly to herself. She gives them just enough money to survive. Since she had taken over the business a couple of years ago and had them sign all the paperwork they had done because they assumed she would be capable and competent. They never imagined she would treat them like this. Now they were struggling to get by, and most of whatever money was made went into her pockets. They had to beg and plead with her for money every single time. They had no other option, since they had already given her everything they had in the past. And now they were totally screwed. So of course, they were asking me for help now. That's the real reason they have reconnected with me after 10 years. To ask if I would be willing to help out in this situation. Since they're not getting any younger. But I immediately told them that I had bad news because there was no way I was supporting them in any way. It's not that I couldn't afford to. I just didn't think they deserved it. They had never looked out for me. So now that they were in trouble, it was quite unreasonable for them to expect me to help. I told them all of this straight to their faces because I low-key saw this coming. When I walked into the house itself, since there literally could not be any other reason for them calling me over. Anyway, after I told them that I would not be able to help them. I decided to get up and leave. My parents tried to stop me and tell me that I shouldn't and that they were counting on me. Since my sister had turned her back on them, I didn't even bother to explain myself, and I told them that it was really my sister had done that to them. But I was doing the same thing since I did not owe anybody anything. Then I walked out as soon as I could. But they've been bothering me ever since, trying to call me from various numbers and texting telling me that I need to help them because they are in serious financial trouble. Now I feel weird. Am I wrong for refusing to support my parents after my sister turned her back? Thank you so much for your comments. I'm sticking to my decision of not helping my parents because they don't deserve it. As I said earlier, I discussed this with my aunt as well, and she said if my father had really needed help then he could have come to her after I rejected them, but he chose not to do that anyway. No, it's not our problem what they're going through. It's been 10 years since they kicked me out, and they couldn't even manage to come up with an sincere apology to me. They even reached out to me just because they wanted me to support them. It makes me so angry every time I think about it, and I feel like I shouldn't have responded to them in the first place. But anyway, at least I did my part and I went to visit them. Even then, they couldn't come up with an appropriate enough to at least try and mend our relationship. It was also pretty stupid of them to invest more and more money into their business, daughter knowing there was a pandemic happening, and they had no idea they would be able to survive it. I don't think anybody needs to take the fall for their decisions, so they can keep texting me and trying to get through to me. But I'm not going to let it bother me. Update to hey. So, 2 weeks ago I visited my parents, and after that, I pretty much didn't have any contact with them. They did keep trying to talk to me, but I did not respond after a week. They even stopped trying, so I thought they were done. My aunt expected my father to reach out to her instead, but even that did not happen, and we were quite relieved. But last night Janine showed up at my house. I don't know how she was able to find where I was not expecting her. The cherry on top was that my aunt had actually come over for dinner last night, so she got to speak to both of us at the same time. When I saw Janine standing outside through the peephole, I decided that I was not going to let her in, and I even told her that we were not willing to speak to her. So she needed to go away, however. She was pretty argumentative and said that what she needed to discuss with us was urgent. She claimed she had no interest in being around us in the first place. But this was important, which is why she was here. She told me that she would wait outside, and she knew my aunt was inside since she had seen the car park outside. So she knew that at some point my aunt would have to come out. And then she would say whatever it was that she had to say. Eventually, I had to let her in because I didn't want any drama outside, and that would definitely be something to talk about to the neighbors. Anyway, when she was inside, she sat down and started telling us that she knew about the conversation had with my parents. 2 weeks ago, she said it was not right to reject them, and that they were very disappointed with the way I had behaved. From that point onwards, I was pretty irritated because she had no right to comment on how I should be behaving. She was someone who got me kicked out all those years ago. The main reason I don't have a good relationship with my parents. Besides, they were not good parents in the first place. But then she literally went on to tell me that I had disappointed my parents. Yet again, she was giving me a chance to redeem myself. She also told my aunt that she had not been for many years, so this was our chance to do better. She then said that she now wanted us to invest in the business, so that she could continue, and they would not lose out on more money in the process. She said that this could be our payback because she believed that apparently my parents had done a lot for me. She even reminded my aunt of certain incidents where my father had been there for her from their childhood. It was obvious that this was she had prepared with our parents, and she was now trying it out on us to see if it worked. Unfortunately for her and my parents, we are not that emotional, and we are definitely not fools like she had taken us to be. I got really pissed off and told her to get out because she had made it seem like there was something that she was trying to tell us. If this was her idea of urgent, I did not care for it when I told her to get out. We got into an argument, and she said that I was being really cruel because our parents were having a lot of health problems as well, and it seemed like I didn't even care about that. I told her that even if I did care, I would not be willing to do anything until they apologized from the bottom of their heart, which seemed unlikely because they did not even think that they had anything to be sorry for. My aunt said that the way things were going right now was just despicable, and that she needed to leave. After that, things got really ugly. We had a nasty verbal spat. Janine said a lot of things to me that were below the belt, and I ended up doing the same because things were finally coming to a head after so long. All the resentment that I had been holding for the past 10 years just came bubbling up to the surface. And out of my mouth, we came really close to fighting physically. But then my aunt intervened and told Janine to get out of the house because she was the one who was provoking me. My aunt did not want a physical altercation because that would not end well for either of us. So she eventually left after a lot of cursing and fighting. It's been one full day since then, but I'm still not over it. My aunt stayed the night because she could see that I was in a really bad state and had a complete breakdown. After Janine left, I started crying because of how terrible she had made me feel. I felt like I had gone back to how I used to feel when they were all against me, and it was just really traumatizing for me anyway. I'm feeling better now, but I'm still pretty mad and hurt. Update 3 Hi. So, it's been 3 days since my last update. My aunt told me that she had received a call from her brother and said that she was planning to visit him in the evening. So I told her that I would come along, so they would not be able to ambush her and try to manipulate her, like they had tried to do to me, because my aunt is a lot softer, and I felt like she would be easier to bully. So I told her that I would come along, and a couple of hours ago, I visited my parents again, but this time with my aunt with me. Once we got there, my parents seemed surprised to see me, but pretended like it was and fine, started telling my aunt all the same things they had told me. But I interrupted them in the middle and told them that she already knew all of this, because she was the only person who had been on good terms with me. So I had told her everything because she was my family. I disrupted their flow, and after that, they did not know how to play the victim anymore, since I had called them out. So they just straight up asked my aunt if she would be willing to help them out with money. My aunt tried to be diplomatic and said that she was going to think about it, but she needed some time, and said that they were not allowed to bother her the way that they had tried to do to me. In the meantime, that's when my parents got really defensive. They were not trying to bother me. They were just trying to look out for themselves, because they were in desperate need, and desperate times called for desperate measures. So I chose to take the opportunity and confront them about what they had done to me. I asked them why. When I was desperate for financial support or some sense of stability, back when I wanted to go to college, they had never offered to help me out. Now all of a sudden, they expected people from their family to help them out. That just seems really unrealistic and kind of unreasonable to me. I told them that I hadn't asked them to give me an explanation that I had visited because them, they did not have anything satisfactory to say, and I honestly didn't care either. But now, since they insisted on asking for help, I wanted them to explain things to me, since none of this made any sense anyway. Once I asked them to explain themselves and their actions from the past, they started coming up with a bunch of lame excuses about why they had done what they did. I don't know how it was so difficult for them to say that they did not like me and had always preferred my sister over me. It was literally that easy. All they had to do was admit it, and I would know that they were being honest and sincere now at least. But they kept trying with various reasons as to why they had behaved with me the way they did, trying to pin the blame on me by pretending like I was not really connected with them. And I behaved very differently for my sister, who tried and really put in an effort to get along with my parents. They were speaking as if we were all in a relationship, and I was not putting in an effort, like I was not literally their child. They were the ones supposed to be making an effort to make me feel safe, which they never did. It was amusing, to be honest, to watch them grasp at straws, because I knew that they did not have any real reason. They did not want to be honest, because they wanted to play it safe and be clever. But I could see right through them, and I just let them go on and fumble their way through that conversation. While I said nothing, I just watched them struggle with my aunt. And towards the end, since they realized that they had nothing able to justify or defend themselves, they actually ended up saying that they had not counted on me being the most successful sibling, which is why they had treated me like that. That just made it so hard for me not to laugh out loud, because even though it was incredibly insulting, it was really funny, because they were just ensuring that we did not help them at all. Once they were done, my aunt and I told them that we would think about and would let them know in a couple of days. Then we left, and they really requested us to consider it at the very least, because that would be a lot of help to them. And also, did you mean it took all my strength not to roll my eyes at them? But anyway, after we left, my aunt and I had a small discussion, and we concluded that we would have to tell them because that would just lead to more drama, and we did not want that to happen.